We've got a great special guest today in Eric Chalmers, a preeminent political strategist and consultant in Arizona's democratic politics and founders of Resilient Strategies. Eric was senior strategist for Gallego's winning campaign. Boy, you've got to be in demand there, Eric. That was a great campaign. And a notable Democratic victory in a red/purple state. Let's have a big warm welcome for Eric being here today and having a great program. So thank you for being here, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. And admittedly, my voice is going a little bit because I was at that, for anyone who's an NBA basketball fan, I was at that Suns game on Friday night where we scored 9 points in less than 45 seconds and appropriately lost my voice. So I will be somewhat struggling my way through this. But as I was saying to Mike when I got on, it's strange for me to be on here, not staffing the candidate, but actually speaking myself. I want to start just with, I think, a note of gratitude to everyone on here and who's not, or members of Democrats of Greater Tucson, the work you do and the support you provide to candidates is something I know as someone who runs statewide campaigns now for almost 10 years, which in dog years, that's like 45, is I rely on your group for signatures, donations, events. I mean, you are a cornerstone of the outreach we do to Southern Arizona, and it's really, really appreciated, all that you do. So I want to start with that. I prepared a deck, and I recognize many of the names here, so I don't, I'm sending a request to be able to share my screen, but I am going to go through kind of the state of Arizona politics. And I just saw it was granted. Thanks, Mike. The state of Arizona politics as I see it right now. I'll get through that as quick as I can, leave time for discussion, questions. Again, like I said, many of the names I see on here, you probably know a lot of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go into a few pieces. Uniquely, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Julie Spilsbury recall in Mesa, what that means, some lessons we can learn from that, a little bit about Turning Point. I'll kind of blitz through some of the groundwork laying, but I'll go to that now, and then we can get to discussion after. And yeah, I think I always like to note I date my anytime I give like a state of Arizona politics update, I have to put the date on it because it changes almost every other day. We know that. A bit about my company real quick is Resilient Strategies. We started last year, 2024. We've got 6 full-time staff. We do, I say, public affairs campaign strategies. So that's, all the way up and down the ballot. I'll have to shout out because we're DGT. We worked on Selena Barajas and Miranda Schubert's campaigns for the Tucson City Council. We also helped run the independent expenditure supporting now, finally, which we need to always call her finally, Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva. I like to make this participatory, but in Arizona, I always make the joke that our politics are, we have our 5 C's, the copper, cattle, climate, citrus, cotton. And then we have our 6th C, which is crazy, that we tend to send around the country. Whenever I get asked to describe Arizona politics in one word or phrase, it's that. Again, just kind of a level set. I mean, it's always important for everyone who runs statewide campaigns here, everyone who's been involved in them, that this really is an open state. We're one of the last few battlegrounds, true battlegrounds, I'd say, left in the country. And every single cycle, and I'm sure you have folks in your lives you've talked to about this, I do, who vote every time and they're saying, well, I voted for a Democrat, I voted for Gallego, I voted for Harris, but then, I balanced out my ballot with a Republican here, Republican there, or vice versa. Meaning that every single cycle, I am actively trying to figure out for my clients, who is that 10 to 15%? Who are those voters that we can make do that for us? And that is ultimately how we win our elections, is that we move that roughly 10 to 15% block of voters to us. That gets more challenging for Democrats further down ballot in the statewide level. But it consistently happens over and over and over and over. Um, I I think the newest, so this is a slide I change every time I do this. It is important to remember, and remember this day that our state very much this is a slide I made on August 18th, 2023, just to give you that illustration that we are making national headlines for all the wrong reasons, but now also recently for the right reasons, and that we are winning statewide elections in times where our colleagues in other states are not. Looking ahead to this cycle, I think it's not only obviously is this governor's race going to be crazy, that we have the path to the majority in the House runs through Southern Arizona with 6. But also that we're going to almost certainly going to have the most expensive attorney general race in the nation's history. It's not any national source to talk to is like this race is the top target for the Republicans and is also the top defense for Democrats. So you're going to be hearing a whole lot about obviously Attorney General and SOS too, but this AG's race is going to be a lot of money is going to be flowing into this AG's race. This is a depressing slide. We won't spend much time on it. I think everyone here is aware of the current registration stats. The one thing I'll note is that a lot of our supposed Democratic losses is happening mostly Democrats shifting over to independents. We're not seeing this like mass migration of Democrats over to Republicans or Republicans suddenly surging in registration. They're not surging as much as they say they are. It is still independents who are registering at the highest clip, meaning that in some ways that 10 to 15% I referenced at the start of needing to win, that number might actually be growing slightly of the true persuadable. And Gail, sorry, I've got the chat right here, so I'll try to answer questions as they get dropped in. I think the national focus on the AG race is driven in part by both the margin of victory that landslide Mays, as I know she certainly refers to herself as, had. It is, if I was looking at what pickup I could have, it would be this race. I mean, 260 votes or whatever it was shows a prime pickup opportunity. And also, I think there's a concerted focus and pressure from DC because of how effective she has been as an AG, both for slowing down the administration's agenda and also, as just a competent Democrat as an AG. I think that's a major point of emphasis. And, between the two candidates on the Republican side, between Rodney Glassman and Warren Peterson, they've got 2 guys who have ties to national money as well that are going to be able to pull in. And we'll talk about Turning Point in a bit, but Turning Point, certainly, given that she has secured indictments against several of their members, has made it very clear that's a priority race for them. Now we'll get off this depressing slide. The upshot of the independent movement, and again, this is data from 2023, but a chart like this, even this cycle, will still look relatively the same, which is not shocking probably anyone on this call, but independents are generally partisans and they just don't want to label as one of the major parties. We all hear this, both parties so extreme, but it's really that they do have a set of values and ideals that they vote along. Data bears that out over and over and over. In part, we lost a lot in 2024 because a number of these folks kind of in this middle gray area who had been with us in 18 and 20 and 2022 changed their minds and they went the other direction. And especially we saw that in LD4 up in the central Phoenix area where we lost all of our races. Those independents swung extremely back towards Trump and the right, but we also certainly saw it in other places. Yes, we'll skip that because there's certainly lots of themes we could talk about. On the ballot in 26, again, probably something you're all familiar with of who's up, but I'll note that this is the first time, and this is the obvious point, but I'll talk about the significance of it. So this is the first time we haven't had a Senate race on our ballot in 10 years. That is significant in how resources are going to flow into the state. It's going to be a different dynamic. There's, obviously added emphasis when there is a Senate race on the ballot. That's not going to be here this time. Certainly, this governor's race is going to draw in a lot of national attention. As I just said, the AG will, but it's a different dynamic when there's a Senate race on the ballot. And not having that changes, I think, one, our TV will be a little bit cheaper this time, which is great. But two, just the amount of national resources and the amount of ads that will be coming in it won't be noticeably less, but from my end, it will be noticeably less that there's going to be less resources coming in. The one other part to note is that the Corporation Commission, and again, Georgia gave us some nice highlights there on public utility races. This cycle, the Democrats do not have a shot at the majority. There are only 2 seats that are up. So in order to take the majority, there's going to need to be a win of at least 1 seat, if not 2, to then have a shot at the 3-seat ticket next cycle. We'll talk about referrals too, because those are interesting. But top of the ticket, reminder that we have a lieutenant governor now. So that's a new addition, a new dynamic to the ballot. There's going to be a ticket for governor instead of just the governor on the ballot. And again, we don't know the fields on Fontes or Mays. I mentioned the 2 candidates, and then obviously Fontes with Colladin being the primary potential nominee there, which I would be pretty happy about that draw if I were Secretary Fontes. And then for the nerds out there, these are also my full disclosure. These 3 are my clients. Nick Mansour for Arizona State Treasurer. State Treasurer, Democrats have not held that seat for 67 years. It has eluded us. I think there's many reasons for that. Primary is that Republicans view both that and the Corporation Commission as, typically Republican seats. I think both the results in Georgia and in others show that fiscal responsibility narrative is something we can contest, and having strong candidates in these down-ballot races is going to be really important and potentially strong indicator. Nick Mansour has so far raised almost $750,000 for his race and is going to make this probably the most serious shot we've had at the treasurer in a while. Significant because the treasurer has a lot of influence on education funding and what they can do to move money into our education system. And then, of course, mine inspector. That's also a fun race that we can pick up there. Just making a joke. Triple match unlocked. Please, but go to these websites if you have a minute. Referrals. I think we all remember the 4-page ballot from 2024, and I think there is a likelihood you could see a similar length of a ballot. I think I've heard Republicans feel like they did make it too long, but when they get into the session and they're getting things vetoed, I don't think they're going to be able to help themselves. And our ballots could be stuffed again. There are already several referrals on the ballots, none of which are, I would say, in the category of super concerning. They're not great. The one that was just introduced that we know is going to be on the ballot is that Florida style, which I put in here, the Arizona Republicans reignite their push for Florida style elections. So this is the one that will require deadlines for early ballots. It's going to cut off the ability to do any kind of same day drop-offs. It's going to cause a lot of issues of turnout that typically favors us. That is going to be on the ballot for this cycle. There's also going to be potentially this measure that was killed last session, the Parents' Bill of Rights. It is an awful discriminatory bill against the LGBTQ community, particularly targeting transgender people. I see that as a potential major messaging bill that they are going to run. Obviously, in both Virginia and New Jersey, those governor's races show that it is possible to beat back those attacks, but it's nasty, and it's certainly a tactic that we see them doing. The will of the people is a brand to keep an eye on. That is the no campaign. Ran no's against a whole bunch of the referrals last time to beat them, but I would say expect a number of referrals on your ballot this election. And yeah, I think especially your districts in Southern Arizona, 16, 17, they continue the underlying metrics, to use another basketball Sports Reference, but they look good. I think even though we did not do well, they look good of the trend lines of where we're headed to be able to win these in the midterms. I feel optimistic both about candidate quality and, of course, the strength we can do down in Southern Arizona to win some of these key races. But yeah, once again, shot at the majority is going to run through 16, 17, and 6. 16, 17 in the state ledge and 6 for federal. Going into the results from November. So I think in Maricopa County, we had a measure called Prop 409. If anyone was tracking the Maricopa County elections, it was a measure to raise taxes to fund Valleywise, which is provides a lot of mental health and social services, and to expand their capacity, expand their beds. That measure barely passed, and it passed like 51 to 49. It came under attack as providing healthcare to illegal immigrants, providing healthcare to transgender people, and it barely. So that the playbook was pretty clear of what was coming on even just a simple measure like 409. Luckily, it was a well-run campaign, so it survived that. Which I was not running it, so giving credit to my other colleagues who ran it and did a good job. And then the other thing we saw, and this was nationally more, is that young voters were coming back, minority voters were coming back, and that the Democratic brand, despite a lot of the hemming and hawing in the media about it being in trouble, was not as in trouble as the Republicans would like to think it is. And that both Governor Sherrill now, or Governor-elect Sherrill, and Spanberger ran campaigns that took on cost of living in unique, contextually appropriate ways. I'm not mentioning Mamdani because I don't like him or anything. I think New York is not as applicable as looking at a statewide in New Jersey or Virginia to what we can take away here in Arizona. And then particularly turning point. So this is where I really want to drill down a bit more, is what Turning Point did. And I assume everyone's familiar with Turning Point. Generally what they're doing, I'll go through them a bit more because I think it's really important that we as Democrats collectively understand this organization. They have essentially, in many forms and functions, not entirely, but essentially replaced the functioning of the Republican Party in Arizona. They run as almost a full year-round coordinated campaign. They have full-time field organizers. They also have a full-time faith program that is a politically motivated organizing program for churches, evangelical particularly, across the state and across the nation, but across the state. They're active on college campuses. They're active in high schools. And it's all kind of an integrated persuasion turnout effort that they are running. I want to show you just a few things from the Julie Spilsbury recall election, which, again, to kind of table set so Mesa City Council member Julie Spilsbury, she endorsed Kamala Harris for president. She endorsed Ruben Gallego for Senate, and they vowed to take her out. They legally had to cite other reasons for it, but that was the reason for it. They, in many ways, by doing this, showed a lot of what they were planning to do. They shamelessly used Charlie Kirk's death as a means of turning out voters. And these were all texts that were obviously sent after he passed away. They were personal. This was a photo that was taken right outside of Julie's house. They were waiting for her when she got home one night, and were putting these signs up all over her neighborhood, and made sure that she saw them doing it. They used transphobia again as their key message. And again, it was hit over and over and over and over. They sent out videos like this. They put high schoolers to camera, just saying straight lies about the Mesa non-discrimination ordinance. And we're saying things like, vote for Doreen Taylor, who was their candidate who beat Julie ultimately, to save Mesa women. I mean, it was as blatant and as discriminatory as you can get, and fear-mongering as you can get. But the positive on this is that they spent estimate is over $1 million to do this election. This is a tiny little city council race. They won by 4%. This was a Trump plus 16 district. At this point, Julie Spilsbury could basically be considered a stand-in for a Democrat And Julie she got more votes than she got in her August 2024 re-election as a city council member. The one thing that's concerning that they pulled off that makes me worried about what they're clearly trying to do for the midterms is that they moved a lot of general election Trump voters into this like off cycle, very otherwise slow election. That's clearly, this is kind of a no duh, that's what they need to do, but they just did it. And they did it by several thousand people, which that's what's given us the edge in midterms recently is that a lot of the people who would vote when Trump's on the ballot stay home. But they just successfully mobilized people who were Trump voters only to vote in this random election. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on. And strategically, it just means that we are going to need to activate more of our, general election voters or others to offset what Turning Point will probably be, has shown they can pull off. Again, this though I mean, their cost per vote was astronomical. How much it fully cost them in both staff time, resources, effort, it was quite high. And so that like it's going to take a lot to get to these numbers again, and they're not going to have the friendly media environment that they were in. But that they did it is still an important takeaway. And right now they are working they have candidates, obviously Andy Biggs, they're fully behind for governor. They haven't really gone hard in the AG's race yet, but in Corporation Commission, they are primarying their two incumbents. And in the Salt River Project Board, which is, that primarily serves Maricopa County, they are running candidates to get onto the Salt River Project Board, which is our other, it's a very, I don't know if anyone's super familiar with Salt River Project elections, but it's archaic. You have to own land to be able to vote in SRP board elections. Um, I still don't even know why it functions that way, but we'll leave that to the side. But I think applicable to you particularly is they have taken an interest in Pima County and they've been doing more. Yeah, one vote per acre, Mike, and I own 1/4 of an acre, so I have 1/4 of a vote. So much political power. But you may have obviously seen what happened in Vail, and that was sparked by this guy Andrew Colvett. Andrew was the best friend of Charlie Kirk. He's taken over regular hosting of the Charlie Kirk podcast, and he was the one who initially posted about the Vail School District and set off the whole thing. They're now also targeting amphitheater and trying to operate in the amphitheater school district. Both of these school districts overlap into some of your swing LDs in Pima County. So they're clearly paying attention to Pima County and are trying to mobilize there. And I just include the very strange photo of Erica J.D. Vance to illustrate that the Trump machine very much understands that Turning Point is to what, Organizing for America was for Obama. Turning Point is that for furthering the Trump agenda. I'll just go to a positive note though, off of Turning Point to Ruben and thanks for the kind words at the start. And I meant what I said about the thank you for your help with that race. I remember the event we pulled off at Brother John's and all the precautions you took to help us safely get our future senator in and out of the event. I think the first piece of the intellectual honesty is that obviously Carrie Lake was a terrible candidate on many levels. But that doesn't mean that race wasn't losable. It very much was. And she, who knows whether she beats a different Democratic nominee. I think Ruben was a particularly strong matchup for her. And a lot of his qualities and strengths really just I think brought out the worst in her more than potentially another candidates could have. Obviously can't say that for sure, but I think it was a really good matchup. And the thing that now our senator was on from the jump is he understood that political outreach, and that's all these different in the Brother John's event or some of the other smaller things, roundtables, community events, not only were they like nice to do for media hits or for, good photo ops, but they're voter contact and you should treat them like that. And like this even goes, the example I always cite is we were out at the cement factory in South Phoenix at 4 in the morning with the taco truck meeting, 75 LIUNA members or laborers union members after they got off the night shift with tacos, which for them was their dinner time. And Ruben was there to speak to them at 5 in the morning about his campaign. No one had ever shown up and done that before. And that was the kind of focus that he had throughout the race. So showing up where no one had shown up before, going everywhere, talking to everyone. It turns out that just that simple authenticity and focus is really a key thing. Um, and then the earn media strategically. So by that, I mean it it was about from the jump creating a narrative that wasn't just about, oh, let's get earned media hits to score the political points to get the job done of like being in the news. Everything that we did, every pitch that we had a point, and had a reason to it and had a piece of the bio we wanted to get out there or a particular narrative we wanted to push back on. There was always a reason for doing earned media. Another key factor is that you probably saw the ads that ran for most of the summer. It was on immigration, and that by the end, typically campaigns will track how their candidate is doing for like voters. You'll ask voters a series of questions on issues, be like, who do you trust to do this or this? And recently we saw, the Trump trust in the economy was really low. We were constantly testing Ruben as like voter trust between him and Kerry Lake. And actually, at one point, for the first time I'd ever seen this, we were at a draw on trust on immigration between Kerry and Ruben. And I think that mattered a lot to pulling over some of that crossover vote. And again, this last piece, taking risks, I think we did a lot of, like I said, a lot of non-traditional events, a lot of things where we didn't know how many people were going to show up, how it was going to go. And we had a candidate who was willing to do that and risk, something flopping because of the value of what he saw in attempting to do it. I mean, we had several like boxing events where we hosted, community-centric, like Latino targeted boxing events where we had hundreds of people show up to watch boxing matches with the now senator. And then last is lots of help. And I think the philosophy we took from the jump was that we were going to like Ruben was going to win this race because we went around the states and asked for help and built relationships and actually just showed up in all these different events. And, the best example I can give is Ruben qualified for the ballot we turned in 14,000 signatures or something. We did not pay for one of them. They were gathered by every single LD across the state and indivisible chapters. And that was just because that campaign focused on that and understood the value of that outreach. So again, it's really that, you win a statewide, no one wins a statewide race by themselves. It is a collective effort to get that done. So with that, headed into 2026, I think I feel optimistic. I have to, or else I wouldn't wake up and keep doing this work. But I think just that 2025 gave me a lot of, the 2025 results were a great indicator. I think now it is on Democrats collectively to stay disciplined and stay focused on what we saw work, but also adapt and make sure we're delivering. I think, the reason I noted that earlier with Spamberger and Cheryl, that contextually accurate, appropriate messaging that, yes, we talked cost of living, but not in a way that doesn't make sense for where you're running in. Root it in the community that you're running in. But yeah, otherwise I would love to, answer questions. And again, I think leave you with that. I do feel optimistic about 2026, but turning point worries me. And there's going to need to be a lot of work done on our end to counter it.
Okay. Well, great beginning. So what we'll do is take some more questions. Well, Eric, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
I thought the ads in the beginning of the campaign for Senator Gallego were just magnificent. They didn't get into who he was or how he voted. They got into his background, how he grew up, his family. I mean, people saw him as a real human being. And I thought that was really well done. The other thing you mentioned, having like outside the cement plant at 5 o'clock in the morning and the boxing. I thought I read something where you all sponsored rodeos
We
for
did that too.
Latinos. I
Yep.
again, genius, genius.
And well, thank you. I think it was, yes, the rodeo sponsorship was particularly fun. That event, there was like 1,000 people out in Phoenix at a Rancho Ochoa was the name of it. But it was that was a really fun event. And I think that I want to pull out the one on the bio ads at the beginning. It's important, and this is getting very pulled out on kind of, and again, in political consulting work, like sociology and psychology and is so much of what we also do and have to be thinking about. And I read a lot on it. Um, in many ways, like our shifts towards like there's less printed media, there's less read news. Like people are getting their information through spoken word, be that TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. It's a lot more bite-sized. And I think we have to understand as people designing campaigns that our candidates are need to be understood emotionally and people need to have ties to like some level of like emotional investment in a candidate to then make a decision based off of that. And I think with Ruben, we really understood that like the veteran, dad, like all these, important pieces that people could relate to also help make him appealing. And I think for any candidate, that level of emotional investment, especially if people just we're moving, I was gonna say we're moving less from a written word to a like oral society where it's just like things are just spoken more. And things are felt rather than like processed, if that makes sense. I was listening to a really good podcast about that. Plain English, excellent. It's a
Yeah.
podcast by the co-author of Abundance. I really recommend it.
And it was
Yeah.
great to see Ruben go to the border too with the sheriff. I thought
Mhm.
that was, very well done. Very well
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Well, my question on the Gallego race specifically is you guys really focused a lot on what I'd call the Hermano vote, like the bro vote, but for Latinos. Did you see movement in polling there that was commensurate with your effort to recapture those young Latino men?
A little bit. I think for now our now senator, it was not just about like winning the votes in the short term. Like I think it was about a longer term effort to re-pursue voters that have been taken for granted. And I think, he felt very strongly about that and correctly so. And like, I don't think we saw, if I were taking like, I can't remember fully off the top of my head, but if they did it make numeric sense in the end, maybe not. Like, but I think it makes sense in the long run. And I think that understanding of, for our candidates, we can't just be looking at, yes, we need to win, obviously, the race right in front of us, but we
Mhm.
need to understand that what we are working on has a multi-cycle impact and things
Yeah.
ripple out
Yeah.
from one.
Realistically, Ruben could be in the Senate for the next 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you should treat it that way and try to stay there and do
So
take steps to get those voters.
one of our questions in the chat from Roderick Norrish is, what are our chances in CD6? Do you have any particular insight into that race? I think Joe is running pretty much her own campaign because she's like the best to do it.
She obviously she is a smart politician. She's a smart strategist. I've known Joe for years. I just don't she just no, she call timed me at like 5:45 on Friday. Like that's how hard she's worked. I got the call. I'm like, Joe, you're still making calls. Like this, I mean, that's great. I'm glad you are, but also it's 5:45 on Friday. But so I did Q&A for that reason. But yeah, I think this is one of those races where you've got a candidate who right now is raising a lot of money and very successfully doing so, and I think has to position herself to essentially get out the surfboard and ride the wave effectively. And like to some degree, like you can add a point or two, but her ability to raise her own name ID and be in a position to take advantage of what's coming, which I hope what's coming and what we're all going to be working towards making happen, is going to be the key. And that's like, and I say that like it sounds easy. I don't mean to make that sound easy at all. Like being in position to take advantage of what's coming is half the battle, especially in a race where you've got a two-cycle incumbent that's, viewed as somewhat relatively moderate, even though we know he's not.
Mm. Yeah, I call him Cisco MAGA.
Yeah. No.
Okay, Mike, we have questions in the chat.
Let me see here. We got a long one from Paul Stapleton Smith. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. He says, "Thank you for your hard work and previous victories. Our labor unions have fought for years to make the case that our economy is rigged against working families, and affordability is the most meaningful, large-scale motivations for the vast majority of voters. How do our Democrats and their consultants get this so consistently wrong?"
Paul, I feel like you and I have talked about this a few times just at events from time to time. I think it's a great it's something that like you have to be connected to the ground by that. And by that I mean like and I'll go back to Ruben's campaign. Like that was why we did so much of the political events and outreach and grassroots efforts that kept our campaign, rooted and focused and tied to what locally mattered and how we understood what was locally important. I think it's easy to see polling numbers, and I really don't mean this as a criticism of my fellow consultants. Like I'm guilty of it probably too, but like you see abortion popping, which worked in 2022, worked very well. And you see some of these other issues like climate or things like people say their priorities, and certainly they are for voters, but like you've got to do both. And when you focus too much on just one issue or another and not focus on kind of creating a message that is accessible from multiple angles, and in your case, like obviously affordability, you can end up saying like, well, and another a key question I always look to on polls is like, do they care about someone like me? Does this person care about someone like me? And convincing voters that that is important. And when you're focusing on maybe on abortion, which again moves people, but you don't address how expensive things are or how, something else that, again, to the contextual appropriateness, like your utility bill is way too high, or you're concerned, like in the summer in July, you're paying quadruple that. Like you're going to see us talking about that a lot on Corporation Commission, obviously. Then you miss a chance to make your campaign accessible.
Yeah.
To a different type of
What I'm
voter.
hearing you say, I guess, is we need to stop signaling to our own coalition with our personal insider coded speak and speak more broadly to the public on the economy.
I think so. I mean, you have to motivate. You've got to give the base something to be excited about. You do, and you can't ignore that. But that not at the expense of the affordability message, or let's just stand in whatever, understanding what is important and what's right in front of folks.
Well, Don has his camera on. All he needs to do is unmute, and he can ask the question that he just asked, which is very germane to what just came up there. Don.
Hey,
Sure.
Don.
Hi. Thank you, Eric, for all of this. My question essentially is, what positive across the board messages do you think will be effective for our state and local Democratic candidates next year?
Yeah. I think I think it is I'd say we have a chance as Democratic candidates to simultaneously fix some of what happened in 2024, which was people felt that our party had lost the grip on working class. To Paul, to your point, like we have the ability to turn that around really quickly, thanks to the gift of the tariffs and higher costs and everything, where we can point back to some extent the economies that have functioned under Democrats that are much higher functioning, much better. But I think that positive point is that we can make the economy, get back to working for everyone. And that focus, especially when people are feeling it so acutely in their pocketbooks, and it's very clear like what why that is happening. That pause, like some kind of not just a message that's like, oh, things are too expensive now, like elect us and we'll change that. But we have a chance to take beyond that and say, we're going to change it because we did this, and it got rolled back, and you see what happened. Like we have a very nice like correlation to causation line that's been almost like made for us, that didn't previously exist, where you could really point to material proof of our policies working, and now that they're going away, that is a a major piece. And the second one I'd add is healthcare. And again, this was what I was happy to see. Gail, you're just like, we're on the same wavelength here. The healthcare piece is gonna like the shutdown was bad in a sense that we kind of caved-ish, but it kept healthcare in the headlines. And if the vote does not happen in the next few weeks on it, healthcare will stay in the headlines and it will continue to be there. And for everyone who's around in 18, you'll remember like that was viewed as a healthcare election, and setting up those same circumstances where, especially in something like Medicaid that hits so many of the voters who turned against us in such an acute way, it will allow us to really positively articulate like, this is what, this is why this is important. Here's what we're still going to do to improve it. And I think that second step, Don, is like, we need to protect it and we're going to improve it by doing this. I think just adding that piece of the message, so it's not just oppositional, but like some kind of vision towards where Medicaid can go, is going to be important. I hope that answers the question.
That's good. If I can do a quick follow-up.
Sure.
How does that fit for Katie Hobbs and Chris Mays?
I think both of them have good stories to tell about what they've done to protect Arizonans from what's been happening, whether that's the governor, trying to find ways to patch in funding where she can, and keeping things stable here, and the Arizona economy headed in a relative healthy, stable direction. So she's got a good story to tell about how the economy under her has actually done relatively well, and that she's done her best to keep things stable but moving in the right direction. So, and then obviously the AG, she can talk not just to the amount of lawsuits she's filed, but like what she has done, and she's been doing this recently really effectively to protect Arizonans, to protect our tax dollars are from being wasted. Like how she's articulating how all these lawsuits she's filed aren't just anti-Trump moves, but that they're actually protecting Arizonans, saving Arizonans money, and keeping them from the winds of DC politicians trying to come in and tell us what to do. And we're protecting our own here.
I've listened to the opposition basically dump lies into the public discourse for about 10 years. Like in that ad you showed with the teachers and the t-shirts, there was a comment in there. Teachers have been the biggest group celebrating, the most prominent biggest group celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Well, actually, no, they haven't. So I guess my question to you is, how do you counter this tsunami of lies?
The counter, and this is really going back to history books, because it is a challenge, especially when they have really invested in an ideologically driven media ecosystem that creates echoes. I mean, you saw how quickly it exploded, and it's because they have intentionally invested in this ecosystem that creates outrage and drives, making these videos or posts viral. I thought Vail, and there's a lot of efforts to, Vail countered correctly, which was facts, truth, like just drive right to like, this is a lie and here is why. And I would say, again, I know I keep referencing the two governors races, but it's the most current recent data point we have. Both Mikey Sherrill specifically she was targeted with, some of the transphobic attacks and some of the stuff like that. And she did the same thing. She went straight at it and called it out for whatever it was and said, this is ridiculous. They are not focusing on the issues that matter. And just went straight at like calling out. Yeah. And that's the same. And Vail did that. They said like these teachers have worn these shirts for many years. Math teacher, like it's important to call out the fact and push back that way. I hope, frankly, that Vail takes legal action against them. I think they should, because the amount of threats and the security they had to hire and everything, I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible for that whole school community that had to face that.
Do you have any thoughts on how, if voter suppression, which is widespread and scattered, might have had an effect on elections here in Arizona? You had people who wanted to vote for Democrats or wanted to vote for Kamala Harris, but couldn't. Thank you.
I don't think there was any, to my knowledge, anything I would say widespread enough that like would have changed any election outcomes in 2024. I certainly think I have a lot of concerns going into this midterm. I mean, you look at what happened in, I think it was Apache County, where bomb threats shut down polling locations for, and that was probably several hundred voters that were not able to vote because people were driving for hours to vote in Apache County, and they were turned away because the polling locations were shut down due to bomb threat.
Yeah.
And if you've had the Secretary of State on recently, or when you do, you'll hear him talk about this, how at the federal level, there's a lot of coordinating entities. There's one entity in particular called CISA that coordinates with secretaries of state across the country and election administrators across the country to address threats as they come in, deal with them, coordinate with local law enforcement. Well, CISA's gone. And a lot of the federal resources that state election administrators relied on are no longer, they're either defunded or they're barely functioning. And barely functioning is in like they have hardly any staff. So I think there's going to need to be a lot of education, obviously, to the point of like some of these election threats, because I think a lot of the traditional resources are not there right now, and there's going to need to be a lot of innovation on our end to just encounter and frankly just a lot of counter narrative pushing.
Okay, Kathy, thank you for being patient.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. So, yes, we can talk about affordability, but you can't make the terms general. I'm going to give an example from Mondani where he got out. I don't know if it was TikTok or YouTube, but it was a short little thing where he went to a little stand and got some halal chicken and something or other, asked the guy how much it would cost. It was $10, but if the system in New York with the permits was so bad that he had to jack it up, otherwise it would be $8. So what I'm saying is it's got to be anchored in something very concrete. You need somebody who has a little bit of charisma and knows how to talk to people on electronic media, and little short deals like that, I think really make a dent, really impress people. So for Hobbs, I would love to hear her say, well, I told the Saudis they can no longer use our wells to grow alfalfa that they ship overseas, something like that, with her standing in a field or something,
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff we need online.
Mm-hmm.
So 2
Clear,
cents.
plain, and relatable. Actually, Gail Conemaris asked a question in the chat that's very closely related to this comment. Kentucky Governor Bashir, who's probably going to be running for president in 28, says Dems need to stop talking upscale. Don't say substance abuse disorder, just say addiction. And I think that's relevant in that we need more plain speaking to the voters.
I agree, and I think that one thing that kind of flew under the radar but should not is the governor's work on childcare and the results that she has delivered on childcare, and some of the work she's done on protecting the developmental disabilities fund, and what some of our state legislators have done to counteract that. Like, these are things that don't and aren't and should be getting more coverage than they are, but they matter. And I know they matter to certain pockets of voters out there who may have never considered voting for her, but now will, because she's delivered on some of these really key pocketbook issues that aren't glorious. And I think to that point, Kathy, like, keep talking about it. Like, that's what the governor certainly, I think her campaign is going to do, is talk about how she's focused on a lot of these very, connected to the ground issues.
Yeah.
Talking about connected, I have a question for you. Who is going to be our nominee for lieutenant governor, do you think?
Oh, that's a good one, Mike.
Oh, I don't know. That I don't envy having to make that decision. That's a tough one. I think there's a number of, very qualified. I'm going to give a political answer here, Mike. Sorry. But a number of very qualified candidates for that position. A number of mayors throughout the state, some state legislators, some non-elected officials.
Maybe a former ACC official?
Maybe. It's a tough list to narrow down, and I think the key is when that happens, capitalizing on the moment that can create. So
And balancing the ticket. Yeah.
yeah.
There was a great article in the New York Times in the last 2-3 months, many articles, but they made the point that we have to learn not to do what we did in the last presidential cycle. And we kind of tried to make it, and interestingly enough, nobody's mentioned ideology. And that was the albatross around our necks last time. And I think we're hearing really good, solid, common sense strategies, if you're going to go affordable, do it close to home that people can explain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. Okay, for instance, did y'all know that because of somebody's tariffs, the Chinese, of course, aren't buying any soybeans from us this year? And guess what? It's been the biggest soybean harvest ever. Now, that's an issue that we have to hit home on. Tariffs are going to turn out to be even worse. They already are.
There's one piece on that. It's understanding who is impacted by, because as I said at the very beginning, like these elections in Arizona are decided by, assuming everyone turns out how they should, there's basically 10% of this electorate that's going to decide who wins this election. And it's people like, can you get those ranchers in Yuma and those, formerly employed like farm workers and others who are now like struggling to find a job because there's no need for their work anymore. Or, the ranchers who I know are extremely upset with what's happening with the administration, especially like this is a very small anecdote, but like the FDA no longer has this, some of its oversight capabilities or its like communications capabilities. There's this screw worm coming up through Latin America that could devastate the American beef supply. Like we could have no steak or the steak will cost you $60 at the grocery store within the next few months, and no one knows that's coming. So it's just yeah, you do. I'm sure. Yeah, any steak enthusiasts will know that's coming. But we know barely anything about it. And it's finding those people who are impacted and mobilizing them appropriately. That's going to be key.
Yeah. Well, Eric, Mike and I were going over all your wonderful resume and credentials. And I think I had it reinforced that you're actually a high school tennis coach, or have been.
Retired. Retired high school tennis coach. Yes, I coached Brophy for 7 years. I went to Brophy for high school. Had many good matches against South Point back in the day. Yeah. Having 2 little kids and owning my own business that forced my retirement from coaching tennis.
Well, thanks so much, Eric. We enjoyed our discussion with you, and there was a couple of questions we didn't get to, but we'll have you back.
All right. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye.